Welcome to the Scale the Chaos podcast, where we talk all things contributing to your business dysfunction. I'm your host, Rhonda Lea, a certified Six Sigma black belt dedicated to helping organizations break free from the chaos. In each episode, I bring on industry experts to share their insights, experiences, and practical advice on navigating the challenges of modern business.
My guest today is Jennafer Martin, an experienced organizational leader with over 15 years of success in transforming team dynamics and implementing effective organizational structures. He is a former editor-in-chief of the much-loved Creating Keepsakes magazine. She is also one of my dearest friends. We have been friends for 25 years. And to put it lightly, we have been through a lot together. One of the things we have related on as we discuss our career journeys is the fact that we have both been unwitting victims of unclear roles and responsibilities, right? And we have both been employees and we have both been managers and team leaders. That puts us both in a very unique situation to discuss this topic. I'm wondering if there's a situation or an aha moment of, wow, these unclear roles or ambiguous roles and responsibilities are really creating some dysfunction and chaos.
Yeah, I was just an intern. I was eager to learn and be useful and that kind of thing. And I've always had a lot of initiative. So it's just kind of who I am. But when I took initiative and I just did a task because it was there and nobody was doing it, I'm like, oh, maybe that's something no one's really thought of. So I'll go do it. And then I got a talking to from my boss about it instead of, hey, thanks for having a lot of initiative and doing I got, you're really stepping on toes and this isn't a part of your duties. And I remember just being like, first of all, my impetus was just to help. So I was a little confused by that. And second of all, I was like, well, whose duty is it then? And so that led to a whole conversation. Then as a manager, I had an experience where I just seemed to have a lot of people coming to me asking me lots of questions. And they were all about the same thing. And I remember thinking, is this a problem where they're not talking to each other? Or is this a problem where I need to do a little bit more management or leadership to get all the stakeholders for this particular thing in one room and sit them down and we'll all be on the same page? And what I found was that that was happening a lot. And then I thought, oh, nobody knows who's like the ultimate authority over this particular thing. So they just keep coming to me. And in my mind, it was very clear that it was someone else.
Yeah.
But I had not made that clear or it wasn't clear to them. I realized I was repeating myself a lot and thought that's probably not the best way to be using everyone's time. I've learned a lot about the confusion. And to be frank, I feel like most people are really just trying to do a good job.
Yeah.
Most people want to do a good job.
And want to be helpful.
Yes. And most people, if they really like their job, they want to do it out of this sense of commitment and responsibility. Being able to direct that commitment and responsibility is so important. Those people become so high functioning and they become fabulous employees. And you just end up having a lot less confusion. And
I have likened it to, I want to play by the rules of the game, right? I want to play the game. I want to play by the rules, but I need to know what the rules are and don't keep changing the rules on me, right?
I get that.
Looking back on your time as an intern and what that does to our initiative, to our productivity, not only does it demotivate people, but it creates a fear and an anxiety to act at all, right? It creates this vicious cycle of now they're not doing anything.
It doesn't just demotivate, it rails our momentum, right? Like we're thinking we're getting going and we're making progress and, the trains are moving on time. And then all of a sudden we're like, I don't even know if I should be doing anything right now. So that can be a lot of derailing of our momentum and our motivation at the same time.
I even had one experience where I was asked to do something by a colleague and I really wanted to help that person. I didn't want them to feel like I wasn't willing to help them. And so I straight up said, hey, I really want to help you, but I've kind of done things like that in the past. So I've gotten my hand slapped So I wait until I'm told by the powers that be that I need to do that. And then I'm more than happy to do that. So the next thing, my boss is calling me in, and I'm thinking, well, he's going to give me the green flag or whatever to help this colleague out. And no, he was calling me in to talk to me because I had told somebody that I had gotten my hand slapped. I didn't say this, but I'm thinking, are you slapping my hand for telling people that you slapped my hand? I even explained my positioning. I said I didn't want to act out of line, right?
Yeah.
But I also didn't want this person to think that I wasn't willing to be helpful. So it definitely was a situation of not only was there a lot of role ambiguity, but it also appeared to be a situation where everybody's roles, not only their own, but everybody else's, was explained to each person differently.
I also think that some people have a management style where they really want to be hands-on. They want people to just do kind of what they're told, which is fine if that's what you've signed up for.
Some of the things that I've seen leaders do to try to kind of mitigate this, once they've identified that it's a problem, right? I have seen anywhere from people who just pull some general template for that particular job role off the internet. And it really more of a placeholder than anything of saying, oh yeah, we have job descriptions. Nobody follows them or anything like that. But I've also seen some organizations who had all of the individual employees write their own job description.
Oh, wow. Those are the spectrum.
What they end up doing is they say, okay, everybody write your job description according to what it is that you do. Which, granted, that is a step in the right direction. You have to start somewhere, right? But this particular business leader thought, well, I mean, I had everybody write their job description, so that's complete. Check, right? Check the box. What I noticed in those instances was they missed going back and then identifying where are there gaps and where are there redundancies. There was a poll, and as many as 50% of employees don't understand what it is that they're supposed to do at work. I found this to be fascinating. And by fascinating, I also mean frightening. It's being attributed to increased stress and anxiety, which then leads to burnout.
I find it really fascinating. That means that 50% of the workforce is confused a lot of the time, which is not the best way to be spending your time. And for companies, not the best way for them to be managing things. So that is staggering to me. We don't live in the same kind of structure of corporate businesses that our parents or grandparents did, where you don't even really become a manager till you've done all of the jobs below that. So you totally get what each of those little pieces, does. So a lot of times people are in management positions that don't understand what it takes to do that particular job or how long task takes and things like that. And rather than say, I don't even know how long this should take, we just kind of let it go and don't necessarily take the time to define it. And then everyone's sort of flying blind. Job descriptions can be this really great contract that everybody works from and where you can pull performance metrics, where you can pull goals for development from. Everybody's super clear. And if not, then you can go back in and clarify it. So I think it's really fascinating to have times where we're either letting people write their own and then we're not looking at it, or we're just kind of pulling a boilerplate off. When I was a manager, we revisited the job description every single year just to make sure that what was on it is what that person's job actually was, because sometimes things change or alter or grow, or like new things come on that we didn't even think of when we first wrote the job description. And I found it to be a really great way to just have everybody be on the same page about what's expected. You can tell if people are meeting reasonable metrics, and they can tell if they're doing their job duties correctly. Otherwise, it just feels kind of subjective and arbitrary. And then some people might end up feeling like, but I thought I was doing all of that. Or I could even show you how I was doing all of that. So how could I not be performing to standard, for example? Everybody getting on the same page just feels so important. And aside from just the morale of it, understanding the parts of everything and how much
Everything.
time they take and all of that helps you dole out the responsibilities.
When I work with organizations, I talk a lot about the RACI chart, which is who's responsible, who has the authority, who do you consult, and who do you just inform. But you actually introduced a new one that I had never heard, and I actually like it better.
Yeah, it's Cairo. Cairo has the same kinds of things, but the O at the end is just zero. Like this person has zero responsibility, input, consultation, that kind of thing. It is so helpful when sort of mapping out processes because sometimes if you're like me as that intern and you're like, well, I want to help, but
Yeah.
I have an O in that particular part, it became like a language that teams could talk through and they could be like, so are you the A on that? Or am I the A on that? That kind of, they had a way to identify what their role was that was very, very quick and easy at each stage of the production. If we needed to do more things, I could say everyone already knows their roles. And so I need 2 more people if I'm going to do this, or I need X more time. And because I know exactly where everybody is and what they're doing.
One of the things I liked when I used RACI is people could see how many R's, how many A's, how many C's, how many I's, right? Especially the R's and the A's. If we're overburdening certain employees with the majority of the R's and the A's, we need to spread the love a little bit more, right? But the other thing that I love about the Cairo model is this zero, because what it communicates is it was actually considered. Because let's say there's a project and we've assigned all our A's, our C, and our I's, but Sally isn't in the metrics. That would lead me to believe, is that because we forgot to even consider her in it? So it's a good indication of, okay, we took everybody into consideration and we realized Sally has 0. And some employees will be like, awesome, I have a 0. I don't have to worry about this. So I'm going to go worry about the ones I have the R's in.
I think sometimes you might think that people would just really lean hard on that sometimes. What we got was a lot of people going, well, I have an O, but if you need me to, I can jump. Or I have an O, but after I'm done with this thing I have an R in, then I can come help with that. All of those things went back to creating an up-to-date job description. Because if we know what your roles are in all of these, they can be under different parts of your job description.
Let's talk a little bit about the bottlenecks that we typically see with role ambiguity.
When people have ownership over their job because they're very clear about their roles and responsibilities, then they get in a good groove. And then other team members can really count on them to do whatever their piece of the pie is, right? Whereas if people aren't clear, so they aren't really doing what we think they should be doing, there's a lot of mistrust that can build because it's dropping balls. And it may even be a ball that they didn't even know they were supposed to be carrying. There's something about that whole knowing I can count on you to do your part at this point and you to do this part, and then I'll come in and do this part. There's something about the well-oiled machine of clear roles and responsibilities that really helps build a lot of trust. I had a freelance writer who was just consistently late and kept gumming up the works and bottlenecking the process and slowing things down. And then we would have to speed up one process or slow down another one to be able to get everything back on track. It's one of those things where you may be an awesome writer or editor, you may be awesome at what you do, but if you can't meet the timeline, so that is going to end up giving more headaches down the line to other team members, then it really doesn't help. Even in trying to talk about new initiatives that were coming down the pipe, because I was in publishing when digital was taking over, or when people were switching more to digital or online more than necessarily print. There were a lot of initiatives that were handed down, and we would ask, what kind of timeline would this take? Or who would be responsible for this? Because it would be something that different departments would have interdependencies on. And nobody had answers. Then we'd be like, well, we don't know how to do this if we don't know who's supposed to do what. Or there's just so much overlap, or people doing the same over and over again. There's a lot of confusion, and the confusion leads to low morale, and the low morale also leads, like you said in the beginning, to burnout, but also it just leads to a lot of mistrust. And when there's low trust on teams, they're not really as productive. When there's high trust, we can be as productive, we be this lovely, well-oiled machine, but low trust really, really mangles things up.
And it's not even just from a roles and responsibilities position, but lack of trust, the toxicity that creates and permeates throughout the organization. It's like a cancer. It can spread really, really, really fast. There have been situations where I have been told that my responsibility is something, but then other people were told that my responsibility was not that. And so as I'm going about doing what I believe was my responsibility, people will automatically assume that I am an authority hog and trying to come in and do things that aren't really in my authority. Or the reverse can happen where somebody is told, hey, this is this person's responsibility, but that person is either not told it's their responsibility or told that it's somebody else's responsibility.
Then somebody feels like maybe you're shirking your responsibilities.
Yeah.
Why aren't you doing the thing you're supposed to be doing? There's accountability issues that come from this, where if a manager isn't telling people what their job is clearly, some people might feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't do my job and I didn't even know it. And other people might feel a need to overcompensate and maybe just do everything or whatever they can think of. And the interesting thing about the toxicity of culture is that sometimes supervisors will not give all the information if they want someone to blame things on.
Yes.
There's that kind of toxicity too, where we always have to have a scapegoat, and we can do that with a weird plausible deniability or like with some kind of accountability issue. Or we can hold someone accountable so that we don't have to be accountable for the fact that we never really told them what their job was. Sometimes it's just ignorance.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is just poor culture. And sometimes it's just a weird tactic to have a scapegoat.
Yeah, it's very non-committal, right? And it's really hard to gaslight people when it's written down on paper.
I had a situation. We went through several owners when I worked on the magazines, and one of the owners found that a particular digital initiative worked really well with a different magazine. So they wanted to do it on our magazine. And when we sat down and asked questions and things, we basically said, this doesn't really work for our audience.
Yeah.
But they went ahead and did it anyway, which is fine. And we did our best to implement it the way we could, even though we really didn't have a ton of expectation that it would be as successful as he was wanting it to. And when it didn't, what he did was fire one of the VPs.
Yeah.
So like, oh, well, this didn't work. So the VP got over whatever it was, got fired and was a scapegoat. And so there was a scapegoat culture of like, all of the poor VPs were like worried that they were going to be next and things like that. So
I have found not only is there more productivity, more trust, but then when it comes to performance reviews, it's very easy to not only identify if they are meeting expectations, but if they aren't, it's very easy to say, you're not meeting expectations here. It then translates into very clear, especially if they have to put them on a PIP, you will do X, Y, Z by this time. Most of the time, within the time that was given, they improved. And it was very easy for me to come back and say, okay, you have now demonstrated that you are capable of performing at this level. You now must maintain that level. Of course, if there's some sort of extenuating circumstances, that's different, right? But under normal circumstances, you must maintain this performance. Otherwise, you'll be promoted to customer, right? In a lot of ways, it actually provides a sense of protection, at least I found as a manager, because there were a couple of times where people would try to fight, oh, you know, I was wrongly let go. And I had all of the paperwork to demonstrate that they were given the opportunity, they were able to perform, and they made a choice not to.
Exactly. Because you're obviously able to do it.
Yeah.
But if you're not always willing to do it, that's really not going to help anybody. You're right. It's not just protective. It also can go back, like whatever the opposite of a vicious cycle is. You can say, oh, okay, so maybe this wasn't clearly defined and that's why we haven't been doing it. And so now we need to make sure that either the job description or the performance review or whatever is very clear about what that looks like. And I honestly feel like when you have very clear expectations, everybody knows their roles and responsibilities, that performance reviews are usually not very surprising. They tend to be kind of like, yep, I think I'm doing everything great. There's some exceptions for sure. But for the most part, everybody could just go back and go, am I doing this? Yes.
Yeah.
Am I doing now I need to work on, like they
Yeah.
just kind of do it themselves. And so even when they come in, a lot of people would say, I know that this has been kind of a weaker point for me and I really want to work on it. I haven't even brought it up yet.
I know. Yeah. And I think self-evaluations, I know a lot of people hate doing them. I mean, they aren't super fun, but from a manager's standpoint, nothing tells me that this person clearly doesn't understand what their role is than a big gap between their self-evaluation and my evaluation of their performance, right? If there's a huge gap, then I myself as a manager have clearly not communicated that well to them. And I need to sit down and explain that to them. I don't see the advantage of not clearly identifying roles and responsibilities when I am wanting to improve productivity, wanting to improve morale, wanting to improve anything. It's just one of those foundational things that if you aren't doing it yet, stop whatever it is that you're doing right now, unless it's literally you're legitimately fighting a fire, finish putting out the fire, right? But anything else, stop what you're doing, clearly define the roles and responsibilities, because I promise it's going to make whatever it is that you've stopped doing go more smoothly, more efficient, more productivity moving forward after you've done that.
Absolutely. You can look at it as an investment in your team or your department or your company, because the more efficient they are, the less money we spend. So the more money we make.
Yep.
You have like a publicly traded company, it makes your shareholders happy, or if you have bonuses or profit sharing or things like that, that helps. The bottom line of it is that it just helps everybody do better. And I really loved when you were talking about studies. There was one from, what did you say? Oh, the International Data Corporation that said 20 to 30% of total revenue loss can be attributed to productivity inefficiencies. Almost a third of what we're doing every year. And so if you invest now in saying, okay, this is what everybody's responsibilities are and everyone's clear on it, then you can close that gap so quickly. That pride and ownership that comes from knowing what your part is and how it relates to the whole is really something that's super motivating. It doesn't have to be some sort of extrinsic reward. It can be an intrinsic, I'm part of something that is very meaningful to people and really helps them feel like what they're doing counts. And sometimes, even if that is only in the department itself, like I know that my part makes these people's parts go smoother or whatever, even if it's just that also is very motivating. But then if you can also draw the line to, as an organization, what we're doing, it's very empowering and very motivating. Whereas the confusion and such that comes from not knowing your roles and responsibilities is very demotivating. And so it's one of those things that seems like a hassle to do, but it's investment and it has so many rewards. Companies that have people that have been there for decades, it's because they feel like they're a part of something.
Going back to one of the things that you opened with is that at the end of the day, the majority of people want to do a good job. Right. I'm a metrics. I'm a data person. I love numbers. I want the numbers to equal out and I want to see all that. But really, at the end of the day, if we step back and we say, okay, these are all people who want to do a good job. Am I, as their manager, am I, as their leader, giving them everything that they need to do that? And clearly defined rules and responsibilities is one of the easiest ways to give them the tools that they need to do their job.
Yes. And then knowing what other people's jobs are, right? If I need something or I have interdependencies with someone else and I'm clear that that person hasn't that responsibility there and this person's role is to do this, then I know who to go to even within the team, right? I have found that I answered a lot less questions.
Most companies have some sort of intraweb, right? Make all of the job descriptions available to everybody to have access to them. I've worked with I don't know how many organizations, especially as a consultant. There have been times where I have gone probably 10 levels deep, just trying to find who it is that I need to speak to about a specific topic or a specific project. And I'll say, well, do you guys have a directory?
You don't even know where to start because they don't even know where the problem starts.
Well, and I would spend hours, billable hours at consultant rates.
Yep.
trying to figure out who the person was that I needed to speak to. Who knows how much that company spent just on me trying to find the people.
Right. The more people know that even if it isn't their job, they still feel like they're contributing if they know where to direct people or who the right person is for the job at the right time. Your idea of posting things on a company intraweb or that kind of thing is such a smart idea, because if one department is doing something just a little bit more efficient, it can just easily be transferred over because you can kind of see, oh, they have somebody that takes care of this. Anything that you can kind of pick up and apply to your own team is so important. It's not like we have best practice meetings. We just got meetings to accomplish things until we do have like, well, this is kind of what's working on my team and this is what's working on yours. That kind of awesome resource is very underused sometimes.
I like your best practices meetings. Maybe they should have one of those every quarter or something. That should be a thing. The other thing that can be kind of related to roles and responsibilities is ownership of certain systems, because that's another thing that I have found when I work with organizations. I'm usually consulting on some sort of system improvement, automation, or whatever. And I'll say, okay, who has ownership of this system? And that's another, I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. Okay, well, if you guys need changes or updates made to the system, who do you go to? Oh, I don't know. We just fill out a ticket. So that should be clearly defined, not just what you're responsible for doing, but if you have ownership over systems or processes, if you have authority, what kind of authority do you have? I worked for an organization and it was unclear as to who had ownership over writing the company emails. And that became a really big source of contention. There were two people who claimed the boss had said that they were responsible for it. That never really resolved itself. It's not that people have to agree with it or like it, right? It just needs to be like, okay, well, this person is in charge of it. And so, okay, done. No more discussion. If you have serious objections, then take it up in the proper channels or whatever, right? There was a lot of time lost on this conflict.
Definitely not like the sexiest part. No. You know what I mean? And it's kind of tedious and it's a little laborious, but it's amazing how this one thing can make such a huge difference in morale and keeping people happy in their jobs, and knowing that it can absolutely lead to that 20 or 30% of inefficiency shrinking so that you could be making, however much more money. That alone makes it a good investment.
Yep. More productivity, higher retention, better experience for your customers. I mean, the list goes on and on of the problem that it solves.
Yep.
This has been a lot of fun, Jennafer. I really appreciate it. I know you're just coming on because we have fun conversations.
Thank you so much.
That wraps up this episode of Scale the Chaos podcast and our conversation with today's guest. A big thank you goes out to my guests for sharing their expertise and actionable insights. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Your support helps us bring more conversations like this to business leaders like you. To find out more on how you can scale your chaos, you can go to my website at www.scalethechaos.com or connect with me, Rhonda Lea, that's Lee spelled Lea, on LinkedIn. Join us next time as we continue to tackle the challenges of organizational dysfunction and help you transform chaos into scalable systems. Until then, stay focused, stay inspired, and let's scale the chaos together.